Hi, I'm Phil Cooke, and welcome to this episode of the Phil Cooke Podcast. Today, I'm interviewing David Murrow. Now, David is an online preaching coach. Now, you may not be a preacher, I get it, or even a teacher or a professor, but there's a reason you need to listen to this. Today, we live in an online world. The digital world has become the language of this culture, and we need to understand how to communicate in that world. Whether you're a business leader or a church leader or a student, whatever you're doing out there, you need to understand how to communicate in a digital world is so vitally important. So while David focuses mostly on pastors, we're going to have a conversation that really encompasses all the ways we communicate in this new digital era that we live in today. So you're going to want to stay tuned and learn a lot. And by the way, you're also going to want to pass this on to your pastor because he could probably use it. So stay tuned. David Murrow, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. I'm thrilled to have you. Welcome.
Thank you, Phil. Good to be here.
You know, it's interesting. You reached out to me a few weeks ago, and I didn't know what you were doing, and yet it's so similar to things I've been doing over the years because I too have a passion for how to get pastors and Christian leaders to engage with today's digital generation more effectively. And the truth is, they just don't do it very well. I assume you've discovered the same thing.
But you and I are both filmmakers. You and I understand how the screen world works.
Yeah.
And you can't simply point a camera at yourself and talk for 45 minutes and expect people to watch that. I don't care how compelling you think your message is, how biblical it is. When you live in when you're putting your sermon into a platform that is a billion different things that people can watch, unless you're able to capture attention and keep attention, people are simply not going to watch it.
That's really good. And, you know, in defense of pastors to a certain degree, seminaries teach about how to preach, how to lead a church, how to manage a church. They don't teach much about how to communicate, particularly in this digital world we live in today. So most of them are going into church situations completely ignorant of what it takes to really connect with people online. We found it really true during the pandemic when churches were shut down. And I had pastors before the pandemic tell me, well, Phil, I don't mind live streaming my service, but that's not real ministry. Well, let me tell you, when churches were locked down, they changed their tune pretty fast. So we're seeing a dramatic shift in the thinking of pastors. And now they recognize the need, but don't know what to do. And that's where you come in, right?
Exactly. I mean, for 500 years, pastors have enjoyed an attention monopoly. A crowd has gathered to hear them speak. No one else is allowed to speak.
That's good.
Every chair is pointed toward them. Distractions are minimized. They're the most interesting thing in the room. And here's the key. Nobody leaves until they're done. And so they can take 5-10 minutes to get to their first interesting point. They don't, honestly, the sermon doesn't even have to be relevant. I mean, people are going to sit there and at least pretend to listen as long as they want. So this has created kind of I don't want to say lazy, but there's not a sense of urgency in a lot of preaching because the audience is going to sit there and, if I don't get to my first point for 7 or 8 minutes, no big deal. They're not going anywhere. When you do that online, your audience isn't going to give you 7 seconds to get to your first point. If you look at TikTok, if you look at YouTube, these videos that are discipling the next generation, they capture your attention instantly. From the very first frame of video, they're doing something interesting. And pastors are not trained in that art because there's this assumption that a crowd will gather and will sit there and listen as long as they want to talk.
That's good. Well, as you know, Microsoft did that famous study a few years ago that indicated we live in such a distracted culture and we're being pulled in so many directions that we've changed our behavior so that when we meet somebody for the first time, we decide what we think about that person in the first 4 to 8 seconds. We haven't had time to talk to them or get to know them or know anything about them, but hey, my phone's going off. I got text messages to answer. I got other things to do. And so we have to capture people's attention suddenly in that 4 seconds. In fact, 4 to 8 seconds. So I even tell pastors, I'm glad your sermon's anointed. I'm glad your worship is fantastic. But in an 8-second world, what's the parking experience like? What's the church lobby look like? Who's the first visitor? Our first person a new visitor meets when they walk in the door? Because today, pretty much people are going to decide what they think of you before the sermon even begins. So the idea that we have to capture people's attention is really the new currency out there.
Well, and even in a live sermon, even when you're commanding a stage, you still need to be sensitive to getting people's attention right away. Because guess what? They're bringing these things in with them.
That's true.
And Oh yeah, I'm on my Bible. Go Broncos, you know. It's
Yeah,
just,
exactly.
yeah, if you it's a whole new world that in the last 15 years we've seen this huge departure. What's this new book that's come out, The Great De-Churching? um,
Yes.
we've lost 40 million churchgoers in the last 30 years or something like that. And what we're doing on Sunday is simply, it's not compelling enough for people to give up their weekends anymore. They're choosing to do other things. And so I work with pastors to teach them how to create a total compelling experience on the weekend so that people say, I want to plan my life around this. And that's what we do.
Let's go back a little bit. You're a television producer. What was the spark that triggered this? What did you suddenly see, or what were you feeling that made you realize I've got to help these pastors capture people's attention more effectively?
Just honestly, just sitting in church and noticing how slowly the most sermons start. And also most podcasts, for instance, Christian podcasts, 5-6 minutes before they get to the guest. There's just a mentality.
Okay, stop. That's absolutely true. I quit listening to podcasts that do that. I had one the other day on a subject I really liked. And that at 12 to 15 minutes in, they still hadn't gotten to the guest. And so I moved on.
No.
Boy, are you right.
Wait, and you understand the laws of television. I mean, what's the first thing when you turn on a TV show? What's the first thing they say? Previously on Lost.
Yes.
Explosions, beautiful woman, like an airplane falls out of the sky. Why do they do that? Because they realize they know that there are other channels you can tune to. Pastors don't understand that yet. When you're used to having the undivided attention of an audience, you don't know how to compete. And so that's my thing. I realize that pastors need to learn how to compete for attention. And so I started the online preaching coach to help pastors create sermons that are watchable, memorable, and shareable online.
So tell me about the online preaching coach. Tell me about the experience. Is it classes? Is it segments? What is it about?
Well, I'm kind of just getting it started. I have done a 15-session course with Corbin University for their graduate program. So that's available. I have that on Teachable if you wanted to take it. I also have a free course on my website called The 9 Commandments of Great Online Preaching. You can go to davidmurrow.com. It's less than an hour, and it'll give you 9 tips that you can use this Sunday to make your sermon more watchable, memorable, and shareable.
All right. Well, let's throw a hook out there. Give me a few examples.
Okay. So we've already talked about the importance of capturing attention right away.
Yeah.
Visuals are so important. When you're on television, it's a visual medium. People are looking for something to look at. When people are online in social media, they're looking for something that looks visually interesting. So a pastor who walks into a pulpit with a basketball in his hands is going to get way more views than a pastor who walks into a pulpit with a Bible in his hands. They're going to say, why is he carrying a basketball? It's going to create curiosity. And then he starts his illustration. 2 men were playing one-on-one. One of them broke his leg, or whatever. You get into the story.
Right.
It's called a teaser. It's called a hook. And so I teach pastors how to do hooks. And here's the thing we're fighting. There are a cadre of very traditional kind of old school Christians who don't like hooks. They think that you're watering down the gospel if you make your sermon. Your sermon was too interesting, Pastor. You're watering down the gospel. But that's like 10% of your guys. 90% of your.
Well, but okay. So I've heard that a lot over the years, particularly early in my career, and it's important to say right now that what the principles you're talking about have nothing to do with watering down the gospel, with making theology simple or plain. It's about how to engage people so you can teach them the Bible.
Yeah, I'm not talking about changing your method. And first thing I say in the first lesson of my college class, I do not want to change your message. I want to change your method. How you deliver it. Because again, the 3 principles: make your sermon watchable. The great frontier, all the people that are going to come to your church. Think about how people choose a church today.
Yeah,
guy moves to town. First thing he's going to do is going to go to Google and he's going to type these words into Google: churches near me.
Yep.
Up is going to pop the most popular of the churches that has had the most hit on their website. He goes to the website. Where's the first place he goes? He goes to the sermons. And what's the first thing he looks at on the sermons? The length of the sermons. And if the sermons are all clocking in at 55 minutes, he's like, I'm finding another church. I mean, right away, you've lost the guy. So that's another thing I teach pastors is concise. Shorter is better. And if you can land the plane in less than half an hour, that's great. If you can land the plane in 20 minutes, You are definitely competing now with the most popular videos online, TED Talks, etc. A lot of pastors are horrified. 20 minutes, I can't fully preach God's holy word in 20 minutes. Listen, when the church was at its heyday in the late 1950s and 60s, the median length of a sermon in a Protestant evangelical church was 20 minutes. And the church was exploding.
Interesting.
We didn't have room to put all the people. Then the megachurches came along, and a cadre of very gifted pastors started going 45 minutes, 40 and 45 minutes. Why did they go that long? Because they were putting the sermons on cassettes. And cassettes had 40 minutes on a side. And that's what drove the expansion of, and now everybody thinks that a sermon has to be 40 minutes. It doesn't. Sermons should be shorter, more compact, single point, and shareable online. And that's another thing we need to talk about.
Well, it's something else is it's harder to do a short sermon. I remember that, Mark Twain, somebody asked him to speak at a conference or an event. And he said, well, if you want me to speak for an hour, I can do it right now. But if you need me to speak for 10 minutes, it's going to take me 2 weeks to prepare. And he's exactly right. To be short is not a matter of cutting, things out. It's not a matter of just of being shallow. It's a matter of being really good to be able to deliver something in 10 to 20 minutes. It's really powerful and to the point. And Mark Twain knew it. And I think it's a good point for pastors to think about today.
Well, and here, I think the future of preaching is going to be hybrid. We think of the sermon as a single 30 to 60 minute monologue you deliver live from a stage. I think in the future, and I've got a video of this on my YouTube page. I think in the future, pastors are going to get up. They're going to address the live audience. They're going to read the scriptures. They're going to welcome their guests, do all those housekeeping items. And then what they're going to do is they're going to put a QR code up on the screen and they're going to say, I want everybody to shoot this with their phones. And the sermon you're about to see will pop up on your phone. And then as God prompts you, have you ever been sitting in church and you think, oh, I wish my sister was here. I wish my friend was here to hear this. Happens all the time, right? If the sermon is video, it's 15 minutes and it's short and it's already on their phone, guess what? Millions of people are going to start sharing sermons from their phones as they sit in church. So that's what I'm trying to convince pastors that they need to do. Instead of doing this single 40-minute brain dump, start videotaping the middle of your sermon, do it really well, hot open, use a visual, bring the basketball into the pulpit, whatever it is, capture attention, make it shareable, and then do the thing where people can actually share it as they watch it in church. And now people are sharing the gospel as they sit in church. When that is over, you step back up into the pulpit and then you do whatever God tells you to do. Should it be an altar call? Should there be some further explanation? Whatever you sense the Holy Spirit telling you to do, you do. But what you've done is you've sent everybody home with a piece of video that they can share with others that's the right length for sharing, that has visual content that captures attention right away. And we can win millions of people's attention and win their hearts to Christ by reformatting the sermon around this hybrid goal.
Now, David, you're radical, man. We're going to get some hate mail here. You're out there on the edge. So
I am.
So let me ask you this. Back during the pandemic, when the churches were shut down, a lot of our clients and pastors all over the country, some of them go home and do their Sunday live stream. Some would do it from another room in the building. Some would do it out in the patio or someplace, maybe sitting at a tall cafe table like I'm doing right now and just share. And that was super, super effective. And I remember so many churches, the pastor would come in on a Thursday or a Friday, and his media team would come in and they would film the live stream service as a separate, strictly for live stream event. And then they would play that back on Sunday. And now that we're back, now that masks are off, we're back in the building, the pandemic's over. We've gone back to let's just capture the sermon up there that we do on Sunday, just the live service, and we're good with that. But I kind of miss those, when they were coming in and did a special online event for their live stream. That was a powerful thing. And they did some really interesting stuff during that time. Now, granted, it's a lot of work to do that and your normal service on Sunday, but still, I don't know how you feel about it, but I kind of regret pastors that aren't doing that special live stream event, during the week so they can play something that was really designed for the live stream audience.
Well, there it is. You have two audiences now. You have the fickle online audience, and you have they're going to sit through 40 minutes, whatever you do. So my philosophy is if you target the fickle audience, the hard to reach audience, you will get the faithful attenders as well. The reverse is not true. So I'm with you. And, I would love, actually, Phil, I would love to find a pastor who wants to reinvent preaching. And let's do Wednesday sermons on the basketball court, or, something visually interesting. Keep them 12 to 15 minutes, do the whole thing with the QR code, sharing it as it's being watched. We're missing this huge evangelistic opportunity, because people come to church, they watch the sermon, and they leave with nothing to share on social media. Gallup just released a poll, just released a new study. The typical US teenager spends 4.8 hours a day on social media.
It's insane.
If their eyes are open, they're on social media. And yet we keep producing 40-minute monologues that are utterly unshareable online. So we need a Manhattan Project for preaching. We've got to figure out a way to turn our sermons back into evangelistic tools that can be shared online, because we now live in a sharing media world.
Okay, so say I'm the pastor of a small to medium-sized church. I have a guy with a video camera out there. I know churches that do it with an iPhone. And give me 3 things I should do this Sunday that would make my message more memorable, allow it to have a bigger impact. Three things that you'd recommend this Sunday.
Okay, well, the very first thing is to start hot. And when here's a big mistake that churches make. When they live stream, they just live stream their service, and it starts with a countdown.
Oh, you're exactly right. Yeah, shoot me in the head.
Would you want, and so people share your sermon. Hey, my pastor had this great sermon. Boom. And what does the sermon start with? 4:59, 4:58, 4:57. Wow, that was compelling.
Yes.
So the best thing you can do is actually edit out the countdown. Start and just post the sermon so that it's not hard to find. The second thing I teach is title is vital. A lot of pastors will title their sermon "A Study of 1 Corinthians." Okay. Now, the only people that are looking for Corinthians are other pastors. Nobody knows what a Corinthian is. But if you title your sermon, "What is Real Love?" that's a term that people type into Google all the time. Yes. And so you have the chance to be discovered, and your message can be discovered. So title is vital. Call your sermon something that people are interested in. Nail down find that gold nugget. And instead of preaching the entire passage, focus on that gold nugget and then title the sermon appropriately. I would say.
Well, let me jump in here real quick. The other thing about a title that I've been preaching about lately is that, in this digital age where you're only going to get a few seconds of their time to capture them, the title is the first thing people see. And if, I tell people when I write my books, I spend probably as much time working on the title as I did writing the stupid book to begin with, because the title is so important. That's what people are going to see at Amazon, or they're going to see on a bookshelf, and they're going to want to take it down. So there's a ton of reasons, and you just given me a new one, why titles are so absolutely incredibly important.
Yeah, in my free course, if you go to davidmurrow.com and take my free course, I've got this fun little game show that I play, and I have 2 bad titles and 1 good title. And for instance, you could call your sermon "David and Absalom," or you could call your sermon "Why Do My Adult Children Hate Me?" Now, which one's going to get more traction online?
Oh yeah, that's great.
It's just. But pastor, so that's the best thing you can do is just give your sermons a title that people are searching for online, and it's much more likely to be viewed online and be shared online as well.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I love that. And let me just say this. You don't have to have a big time media team to do these things. You don't have to have a big time communication team. These are simple, cheap. Actually, there's no cost to them at all. Things that you can do to make your message and your Sunday experience more compelling. I just think that's so incredible.
Yeah, my 9 commandments don't cost anything, and you don't need any equipment. You don't need to pre-tape anything. So I really encourage you to go to davidmurrow.com, take the free course.
That's great.
Simple little things that you can do. And then if you want to dive in more, you can take the paid for course. But just please, pastor, just Just start doing these little things. Your congregation will notice it, and you will make your sermons more watchable, memorable, and shareable.
And the other thing that I think is worth noting, and you might have an opinion about this, is when you are preaching to the congregation, look at the camera out there. The congregation doesn't realize you're looking at a camera. It's out there in the middle of the audience. And they just assume you're looking out at the audience somewhere. So, don't focus on it entirely, but as you look at the congregation, embrace that online audience. I think a lot of people, a lot of pastors just think hanging a camera on the balcony and live streaming that is going to be a compelling presentation. And they don't realize we have to take that online audience seriously. We want to make them feel like they're a legitimate part of our congregation. And when we do that, it changes the dynamic. So all those little things are really vital. I mean, what do you think about those ideas?
Oh, it's true. I mean, if you want them to come to your church, I mean, your online sermons are your audition. They're going to watch you preach. They're going to watch you preach, and they're going to make the decision in 3 or 4 minutes to whether or not you have game. Whether you can communicate.
That's
and
good.
I can tell you, if it's a slow introduction, if you don't get to the point fairly quickly, they're going to say, all right, I'm going to try the other guy. And eventually they may stop trying guys because nobody's a compelling communicator. These are just basic communication skills that you need.
Yeah.
And so, good sound, good quality, eye contact with the camera is good. You were saying, if you just have an iPhone and you wanted to do like a little insert in your sermon, that's fairly easy to do. Put your iPhone on a tripod, take it out into the field. Let's say you're preaching on that passage where Jesus says, do not store up riches on earth where moth and rust destroy. Well, why not do a little 90-second insert or 30-second, 40-second insert of you in a junkyard standing in front of junked cars? And you say to the camera, you start your sermon off this way. Every one of these cars was someone's prized possession. They drove down the street and honked the horn, and their neighbors waved, and the kids jumped into the back, and they paid thousands of dollars, and it drove them to the grocery store and to the work and to church. And now look where they are. Yeah. They're all junk cars. Why are you storing up riches on this earth when you can store them up in a place where they will never be destroyed? And, do your sermon intro from the field. Yeah. And you don't need it. Again, you don't need a production team. You don't need fancy equipment. Just a little clip-on microphone and a phone camera is usually all you need.
Well, someone told me not long ago that there are 2 film festivals in America for feature movies shot on iPhones. So, when I started my career in my 20s, one of the first jobs I worked on was a national television special, and a single video camera cost $250,000. And that camera doesn't have nearly the image that my iPhone has today. So we all carry a TV studio around in our pocket and we don't realize it. So I think getting out there and experimenting with some of these things, I think is really important. And before we go, I want to address the issue that so many pastors still, after all of this, they look at this as an either or thing. Either I'm reaching people online or I'm going to get them into the church and reach them there. But for me, it's both and. However people choose to engage with your church, make it an amazing experience. Make it as good as you possibly can. Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. People are going to find you online before they come in person. Yes. Like I said earlier, that's your audition room. So you have to create online sermons that are compelling, that are concise enough that people are going to watch till the end, because if it's 40, 55 minutes, that's challenging. And it's not either or. It's the people that are going to come to your church are going to find you online. And here's the other thing too. Google ranks you. Remember we talked earlier about how churches near me? Yeah. The mega church is the one that always goes to the top because that's the one that people search the most. But you can beat the megachurch if you create these shorter, more compelling sermons that people can share, because that raises and people come to your website and watch them. Because the more people hit your website, the more the higher you rank in Google. Yeah. So you can beat the guy at the megachurch with the big biceps and the smoke machine, who goes 55 minutes, right? With your 15-minute sermon that you shot in the junkyard, because it's easy to share, it's easy to rank, and this I think this is a strategy for small to medium churches who are frustrated because everybody goes to the big show.
Yeah.
Well, you can beat them online
That's
by
right.
tailoring your message to the online audience. And like I said, it's well received online. It's going to be terrific in person.
And I'll just say that, if you happen to have a message that goes 45 minutes or something, and it's really compelling and really powerful and gripping, great, run with it. But I would say ask some people in your congregation about that. I love Joe Champion at Celebration Church in Austin does an amazing thing. On Thursday afternoon, he'll go into they have a chapel there at the church. He'll have his leadership team come into the chapel and he'll preach his message for that Sunday to his leadership team. And they'll all make notes. And then he'll sit down on the edge of the stage after it's over and they'll say, okay, guys, what do you think? And they'll give him ideas. Oh, we thought that one story about the house was a little too long. Maybe you should cut that in half. Or what about this? We think maybe you should mention this scripture again. It's fantastic. And I wish pastors would get into that mode of editing, thinking, developing, concepting. It's just not, you don't just write a message out once, go out and do it. Let's think about, okay, let's preach it. Let's hear back some feedback. Let's talk to people in the congregation. What do they think? Because those 45-minute sermons may not be as compelling as you think they are, even though you're trying to cram everything in. So I totally agree with you. I think that sometimes a powerful 15-minute message or 20-minute message can be an amazing thing.
Well, and here's the thing too, if you decide to go hybrid and you have your 40-minute preaching slot, but you do 15 minutes of video in the middle.
Yep.
You tape that on Wednesday, send that out around to different people before you send it out. Before you actually play it, you could discover, oh my gosh, that came across really, really bad, or I really need to emphasize this more. And you could retape it on Thursday. I mean, it just opens up so many possibilities for making clearer communication of the gospel and making your message more compelling to both the online and in-person audience and making it shareable. I sound like a broken record here, but
no, go.
We have got to make the gospel shareable online, and it's just simply not in the format we're doing it now. This lengthy monologue delivered live from a stage with a drum set behind me. That ain't going to get shared.
Well, it's funny that, everybody in your church pretty much has a Facebook page. Most of them have an Instagram account. Some of them have a Twitter account and other things. And yet we share it very little. Why isn't your message being shared more? Why aren't your services being shared more? And whatever you can do to encourage your congregation to share what you're doing on Sunday. I mean, just think of the exponential nature of that. How many people could be reached? Even if you have 50 people in your congregation, think of how if they're sharing and other people are sharing, and it just goes on and on and on. So you just never know how big it could be.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus had 12 guys and they shared.
Yeah, true.
I mean, and now we all follow him. You don't have to have 3,000 people in the smoke machine and all that stuff, the special effects. If you've got a good, compelling, concise message grounded in God's word, delivered properly for the medium that it's intended for, the online audience, you can reach a very large audience through sharing. But you've got to prep your people for sharing, use the QR code. I mean, this idea of sharing a message as it's being preached, nobody's doing it. I'm getting you in on the ground floor of this one, Phil. Nobody's doing this as far as I know. But in 20 years, they're all going to be doing it because we've got to make it easier for people to share the gospel online. And I think pastors are going to wake up to this.
I think the bottom line principle to all this is the platform you share a message on is just as important as the message you share. I've often said that how you share a message is as important as the message you share, but it's true on a platform. You read a book and you think that book is fantastic. You go see the movie version and it's terrible. Sometimes the movie version is better, but not often. You preach a message in the pulpit, that's going to be a different experience than if somebody's watching it online. So, or in a podcast, driving in their car on their commute. So we have to just be conscious of all the different ways people use the material that you're doing, and they're going to listen and hear your message or see it. So I just think it's very important for pastors and leaders to understand today that every platform is different and they all have strengths, they all have weaknesses, and we need to think of that more in the way we prepare our messages for Sunday and any other time we teach.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a visual world now.
It really is.
98% of the content on social media is either video or pictures. And if we think we're going to win the world by talking to them for 55 minutes about Jesus, that's still going to be a part of our arsenal, but that is not what we lead with. That is not how we attract attention to Jesus. This is the saying that I often say. Our offer to the world is this: you got 40 minutes? Let me tell you about Jesus. You got 40 seconds? I got nothing for you. And that's what breaks my heart.
That's true.
One time I timed the parables of Jesus. I read every one of them with a stopwatch in my hand. Did you realize that the median length of a parable of Jesus is 38 seconds? And then I look at the pastors and I say, if Jesus was able to change the world in 38 seconds, what makes you think you need 38 minutes?
That's true.
And then, of course, that's when the pastors all yell, crucify, and take me to the brow of the hill, try to throw me off. So,
well, you know what? People don't realize how short the Gettysburg Address was.
2 minutes.
One of the most founding, incredible, and really important documents in our history. That's just incredibly important, and it's super short. So
2 minutes.
Short is not necessarily bad. It's a question of power.
And the guy who spoke before Lincoln, whose message is lost to history, he spoke for 2 hours.
That's right. That's
and
right.
Then Lincoln
That's
gets
exactly
up
right.
for 2 minutes.
That's true.
Yeah. Short and powerful. We've got to be thinking in terms of short and powerful. And I'm not saying your sermon has to be 2 minutes, but would it hurt you to create a little 1 minute promo that leads people? It says, hey, this Sunday we're going to be answering the question, why do my adult children hate me?
Yes,
if you know anybody who is estranged from their kids, send them to Sunnyside Church this weekend. Here's our address. Come see us.
That's fantastic.
A simple little promo like that you can put out on social media, target the people in your area, throw $20 at it, and get some visitors that way. But you have to answer the question they're asking. You can't say, well, come to our church. We're going to be preaching from the book of Lamentations this weekend. That ain't going to happen. You've got to contextualize the gospel in terms of something they're interested in.
All right, you sold me. If I'm a pastor out there and I need an online preaching coach, what do I do?
Well, go to davidmurrow.com, which is my website. Watch the little intro video there, and it'll show you everything that you can subscribe to. My course, the free mini course, the 9 Commandments of Great Online Preaching, is unlocked, and you can watch that, share that with other pastors that you know. You can email me at hello@davidmurrow.com. And keep a really active Facebook page as well at Church for Men. My ministry started around my book, Why Men Hate Going to Church. And so I still focus a lot on men's issues and stuff like that. So just reach out to me. And honestly, if you've got a church and if you're a pastor out there and you realize that the current model of preaching ain't working, and you want to work with me to really reinvent this thing and make it more effective, send me a line, drop me a line.
Yeah.
And I will help you figure out a way to make your sermons more watchable, memorable, and shareable. We're going to have to redo the plumbing, rewire how we do things.
Yep.
But the gospel is powerful.
Yes.
But we've got to be willing to change the method to get the message out.
And let me say too, that if you're a church member and you're listening to this and your pastor's, if he's guilty of all these sins we've been discussing, maybe you ought to forward this conversation, this podcast to them and tell them, hey, you're not going to believe this interview with David Murrow. You need to listen to this. It could really change the course of a pastor's life. So I recommend if everybody listening, somebody who really struggles with preaching under time. They struggle with long, boring sermons. If you know that person, send them this because it could make a difference, or send them David's website, davidmurrow.com, and we'll get them that information. So David, thank you so much for being a part of this. It's a great conversation. I might need to have you back because this needs to be an ongoing conversation that we're having with pastors, because I tell you, you can't emphasize this enough, huh?
Yeah, and I would enjoy coming back and getting into some of the more specifics of the 9 Commandments. Let's break into those and make it into a more of a seminar type thing where we can really train some pastors. I think that would be really valuable.
That would be fantastic. But in the meantime, to go get your 10 Commandments, where do they go?
There's only 9 Commandments. I'm sorry.
9 Commandments.
I couldn't compete with the original. Go to davidmurrow.com, sign up for the free course.
Cool. Thank you so much, Dave, for being a part of this. Well, thank you, David. That's amazing. You know, I've always believed in what David's talking about. In fact, in my book, Maximize Your Influence, I have a whole chapter about speaking and teaching and preaching to a digital generation. It's a different world out there, and we need to understand how that works. So don't forget, if your pastor is struggling with trying to reach the online world, if he's struggling with live streaming, if he's struggling with anything related to social media, I'd encourage you to get this book as a gift for your pastor. You really need to consider this. It's easily available online. You can go get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. And I just think that this book can completely transform your pastor and members of the leadership team at your church. So, you know what? This Christmas, get them all a gift. Get them all a gift. Get them my book, Maximize Your Influence. It can make such a dramatic influence and difference for them. So stay tuned. Go to my blog at philcooke.com for more information about what we're doing recently and the things that I'm discussing and talking about there. And I'll see you on the next episode.